ho, ho. Happy Connect this. Should have had Doug do that. Would have been way better.
Yeah.
Tried to move my face away from the mic a bit so it wouldn't be too overwhelming and horrifying, but we can always just set the start date to be right now. Welcome to the show, everyone. We have a special show. It's our year-end show, I suppose, unless we decide to get together next week. Unlikely, I think. But we're going to do some year in review. We are going to have a special guest at the end of the show. Gigi Sohn is going to come on and talk a little bit about some national dark money, and we'll talk about whatever else we want to chat with her about at that point. We do have a Peepaboo, which is a bit entertaining. We are going to do talk a little bit about government-only fiber networks, which Doug Dawson wrote about, and then another topic that Doug wrote about: will states lower the cost of building networks? Not looking great. I'm just going to spill the beans right there. So we should do an introduction for everyone. So I'm trying to reorder that didn't work well. We got Doug Dawson, CCG Consulting, in a festive red Christmas sweater.
No, that's not festive red. That is Grateful Dead skeleton Christmas sweater.
Excellent. We have Kim McKinley, who is preparing to go out for a night on the town with UTOPIA Fiber.
At 12:02. Cheers, everyone, to an amazing 2023.
Wonderful. Nice goblet. And we also have Travis Carter, who probably has more than a few goblets in his collection somewhere. Travis with USI Fiber. Welcome back, old Trav.
Hello, Mr. Mitchell. How are you enjoying our nice balmy fall here? Winter?
Are you still digging? It's
we are, yes.
December 13th.
Friday is the last day for most of the crews, but this has been a very it's been a good season, let's put it that way. And yes, wow. I have the appropriately sized goblet for me. So, Kim has the dainty little flower goblet. I have the large fat boy goblet. So
I just had a chance to spend a little bit of time in Maine with a few people on my team, and we did a training on broadband for beginners with AARP Maine that went well. And one of the people who was there said that they actually prefer doing cuts in rock in the winter. They do a fair amount of rock cutting because they're sitting on that granite, and so they prefer to do it in the winter rather than the summer.
Well, anything to keep that temperature down of the drill head, I would assume.
Yeah, probably shatters easier when it's cold too. Yep.
So let's launch into the Peekaboo. What do we got for Peekaboo? Oh, I should also say this is Jordan Pittman's initial foray into running the board. So welcome, Jordan. But we do need the picture to do the Peekaboo.
There we go. Almost.
Maybe Rye was helping you and took it back. So this is up on a line somewhere and looks pretty funny. But what is going on here, Travis?
Well, I'm not sure we're allowed to show this picture. This might be patent pending. So it looks like one of the latest state-of-the-art splice enclosures. Looks like they took a couple of strands and spliced them together and put them in the bottle to protect them from the elements. And the duct tape, I think, is a nice touch.
Do we want to guess? I mean, I'm going to guess that we got this from a viewer. So thank you for contributing. Do we want to guess who it is? This to me looks like Frontier work to me prior to the bankruptcy.
Yeah, that since the Coke bottle is kind of universal, I'm not sure we can decide. Yes.
But some technician said, "Look, I got to protect this. This is all I got because my company was too cheap to give me another splice case." So
yeah. I'm guessing it was Friday at 5 o'clock. Service was down, and this was the quickest way to get it back up and running.
And of course, they're never going to go back and fix it.
Oh, no. Yeah.
It works.
It works fine.
Yeah.
So.
For the beauty of an aerial network.
It's an eco-conscious, guys. I mean, if it was Friday at 5, it would have been like a Coors Light bottle, Travis. Yeah. So it's a Coke bottle.
Well, it won't work forever because eventually the tape holding it together will crack and split, and the bottle will fall.
Yeah, but maintenance, Doug. They might go have a maintenance window and just go up and replace the duct tape. You never know.
Or they might just go up and replace the bottle.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like, if you hear stories about supply shortage, I think it's a creativity shortage is what we have.
Yeah, that works.
Love it.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 1, which is the year in review. So, what's happening? What happened this year? I've got a few things to share, but
we all got
Kim's got her hand up first. I
Go
saw
ahead,
Kim hand up
first.
first.
I got it, but I want to tell you, Chris, what is the broadband? I just wanted to ask you, what is the definition of broadband in the U.S. at the end of 2023?
The definition of broadband is that Travis is owed free wings. That's what the definition of broadband is. It remains at 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. But I'll just say that time has passed the definition by, and since nobody cares what the FCC says or does anymore, it's irrelevant.
Hold on.
I was curious.
Is that a 3P now?
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, at this point, you're like Tom Brady teamed up with like Michael Jordan and Joe Namath or something like that. I don't even know.
None of those look like me. I'd go more like Rodney Dangerfield for older folks. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the year in review, and I did steal this from someone who said, way to go, FCC. At this point, like, you don't distribute money anymore. You're not even in charge of spectrum policy. The NTIA's taken that over. The FCC has lost the faith of everyone, from the White House to the populace to Congress. Nobody expects the FCC to do anything. Welcome to the diminished expectations of a poorly run agency.
That's a pretty good summary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
you're not going to get any disagreement out of us.
No. Let's move on to the year. What else happened this year that people want to share?
My favorite is something that didn't happen. So we just passed the 2-year anniversary of the formation of the BEAD program, and absolutely nothing happened in all of 1923.
Oh, are you kidding? No.
Nothing.
There's like 300 or 400 new jobs that have been created in state and federal government to manage all this stuff.
True, and lots of money spent on that effort, but 2 whole years and there's no grant money ready to go out the door yet. So.
But what did happen along with those jobs?
Second thing did happen. Something did happen. And one thing.
Go.
And this is Travis's item. We'll let him carry it. The maps came out. Travis, do you want to talk about?
Well, I thought is that over now, or are they still doing that?
No, the maps are still going on, and that's going to keep happening.
But the maps were you highlighted your year, weren't they, Travis?
Well, they got the most rants of 2023, I would say. But that's actually seemed to taper off now with the version 2 maps. We haven't gotten a Mitchell rant on that, or
because I mean, at this point, it's just
it doesn't matter anymore. They gave the money out.
Yeah, it's like if you have a child that you love who's like made some bad choices and is in jail, like, are you going to complain about that every day, or just you kind of get used to it at a certain point? Like, it's just
okay, just gets normal, huh? Yeah.
Travis, what happened is they defeated Chris Mitchell's positivity with those maps. They finally got to where Chris didn't have hope in something, and that was the maps.
No, there's hope. There's absolutely hope, and the hope is in the uncertainty. Rebecca Solnit has written about this, and I think she's very sharp on it. It is uncertainty in which lies hope, and I was talking about this with someone. Regarding the Middle East situation between Israel and Palestine, and I was saying that I cannot imagine what a solution will be that we won't be all horrified at what is happening over there, and that there will be a solution. But in the 80s, people thought that the Soviet Union would be around forever, and there was no way to deal with it. And things change, and it's in the uncertainty where we have hope. So I have no idea how the FCC gets back on top of its game. I can't see a path to it, but the fact that there is uncertainty out there means that it could happen, and in our lifetime.
Okay, did you just compare broadband maps to the end of the Soviet Union?
Yes,
I just have to ask.
He did. You know why?
I don't think it was a comparison. It was an illustration.
He's shooting for the digital Emmys here. So.
The maps came out. We actually did record our Community Broadband Bits year-end episode, but it won't run until next week. So on there, I will spill the beans that we did expect there to be more controversy around just how awful that whole thing was. And in the end, it turns out nobody cares. So broadband, no one cares.
There is something else that happened this year that Travis should comment on. I think we finally saw the supply chain come back to normal.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Did it come back to normal?
Well,
I'd like to hear.
That was one of them. Yes.
I mean, to me, I'm curious about this because, like, this is tied into your first comment, Doug, about how the money came out and hasn't been spent yet. Although, you know, it takes a while to spend $42.5 billion without just giving it away and having a lot more of the misappropriation than I think we may be likely to see. But it had played some role perhaps in the way the companies like Nokia, I feel like, are really down on their luck, right? I mean, Nokia in particular is taking it on the chin at the end of the year here with the AT&T announcement about moving over to Ericsson. But the supply chain came down in part because those companies ramped up, and I feel like they ramped up at the time the market was like going down, and they found themselves in a pretty bad place. It's good for Travis's warehouses.
All the big guys have a year's worth of stuff in a warehouse still, so that's not good for the vendors. Yeah, but Travis, how's your supply chain going?
Well, so as you can imagine, like everybody else did, we ramped up like crazy. You know, when the uncertainty in the supply chain, and filled up an entire 40,000 square foot warehouse full of parts, bits, and pieces. And then I think the vendors ramped up their production to offset what they thought was going to be the new influx of orders off the BEAD dollars. That didn't happen. And so now the vendors are scrambling to sell you anything while we have plenty of inventory, which sadly overlays with what I think is the number one challenge of 2023 was the interest rate. You know, raising as the bankers would say, 600 basis points in 9 months, or for us normal folks, 6% increase in 9 months, while you're sitting on millions of dollars of inventory. Yeah, it's a tough recipe. It's a tough recipe. So the things for me is supply chain. You can get what you need when you need it right now, right away. Everybody has it. You're paying tremendously more for those assets. And I guess I would leave the lastly is what I call the fiber boomerang, which is a few customers going over to the cell phone in a box products and then coming right back after they realize they can't run their ceiling fan while they're on their Zoom call. So that's been fun to watch. Those are my
the ceiling fan always gets a mention. I do love that the ceiling fan.
Well, that and the 6 gigahertz FCC under Ajit Pai, which by the way, shout out.
That's 5 years now, man.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
But
now
it's good.
Now here's another thing about the supply chain. So originally we thought the awards would stretch over 3, 4, 5 years, and now it looks like they're going to award almost all that money next year. That's good. It makes 25 brutal. All of a sudden, that 40 billion is going to come to bear all at the same time. So all of a sudden, there are going to be shortages again just because of that. So
I think so. I think what you're seeing too. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask how much of that 40 billion actually goes to parts and pieces.
Probably 30%. So, yeah, which is a lot. So, yeah.
I would say that what I think that we're starting to see, and it was a prediction, that private equity is starting to fail in this space. And you're starting to see people who jumped in this space because they saw a gold rush. And now they are here, like seeing and hearing how hard it is. I talked to some big companies last week and they were like, yeah, I think we were a little not prepared for what this actually entails by building a network. So I think that came true in 2023 as well.
Yeah, it turns out that this is hard work, huh, Travis? I mean, I just come back to one of the stories I was told by some folks that were subs, I guess, on some of this Google fiber projects, which, you have these people who are like, we're with Bechtel, we'll make those utilities work on our schedule. And then, Google is like, we're Google, people are going to change their processes for us. And then they find out that no, the owners of polls do what they will, and the rest of us suffer what we must, to appropriate a saying. Doug?
Well, Travis has 2 more on his list. It's his turn.
No, he went through all 3.
Oh, he did?
Interest rate, supplies, and the boomerang of fiber. So those were kind of my 3 topics for 23. And of course, the never-ending victory of the FCC speed, but I don't want to talk too much about that.
Well, we did finally resolve one of the bets, and we got a 5th FCC commissioner finally after 3 years. So now, it's been too early to know. Does that make a difference yet? We'll find out.
Well, I mean, they passed more ambitious rules than they might have otherwise, right? So the digital discrimination rule, which I think we've agreed will result in no real change from the FCC, and I think that local groups may be able to use the passage of it in productive ways, but the FCC is not going to do anything with it. But having 5 commissioners meant they could have a more ambitious rule they don't enforce, as opposed to the less ambitious rule they would have had with 4 commissioners that they also would not have enforced.
That was quite a sentence there. I had to think twice.
I'm still processing it. I'm still processing it, Doug.
It comes back to if you're not going to do something anyway, you might as well not do something big rather than not doing something small.
All right.
True. Let's focus on the positive.
It's a philosophical day, apparently, but I'll stop because this isn't going well.
Let's focus on the positive of what happened in 2023, guys. How many more homes did pass with fiber this year?
A lot. We're at more than 50% now, right?
And I think that is a huge accomplishment.
I'm not sure I believe that number, but it's a lot. That seems.
Way to go, Doug. Way to be the sour note.
I keep looking at markets and I don't see anywhere near that in the maps. It's just like, where are those homes? So that's a lot of homes. Most of the big cities do not have fiber. And that's where you have to get the big cities up there.
What do you mean by don't have fiber? Like at this point, I would assume that all major cities have some small amount of fiber at least. I mean, like
yes,
like Lumen, Century, like yes, they've done some,
but they're not 50% covered. A lot of them.
My house is covered now, and I feel like I was going to be in the second half, so
yeah,
must be here.
It could be true. I just don't see it looking at the maps because you can map fiber, and so. Could be true. So,
Doug, you only say that because you're still on cable, and the rest of us are. Travis, are you on fiber? Because I'm on fiber. Chris is on fiber.
Travis is probably on Starlink here.
No, today I'm on DOCSIS today. So
no, but I think the question in my mind, Doug, would be like, how are they counting apartment buildings? And
right.
Have we just had a massive increase? Because I do feel like if you go back to continue our year in review, since. This isn't the year in review, but 5 years ago, I felt like an apartment building was the worst place to be for connectivity. You probably didn't have a choice. It probably was using older technology. And now I feel like there's a bunch of business models that are going after apartment buildings solely and trying to get them well connected. And so maybe it's a whole lot of new units that came online in different cities that push that number up rapidly.
Okay, this could be. One other positive thing for the year, which was very surprising and unexpected, is that the fixed wireless access, the cable companies added 3.5 million customers last year out of nowhere. I mean, for the last quarter of this year, cable companies altogether added 8,000 customers nationwide, and that was all Charter. So they're all losing customers. And that came out of nowhere. No one expected that. Fixed wireless, just Verizon and AT&T now have 6% of all broadband customers in the country.
No, I think
that's huge. That's monstrous.
That is huge.
Well, and my impression is the equity analysts, I think, looking at that, felt like this would be a blip, right, and that it would settle off. And
well, now the T-Mobile guys are saying their goal is to get to 15% of the market, and the only way they get there is somebody else loses 9% of the market. So,
I mean, I think part of this is that people are conditioned to not having good service, right? And I think they're sort of like, well, if I can save money and not have great service, does it really matter that much to me? I switched over to fiber, and it is really nice in some respects. In other respects, I'm still constrained by some of my internal issues. And so as you get better and better, the difference is lesser.
Wait a minute, Travis. It took him only how many weeks to start complaining about his fiber?
I'm not complaining about it.
Yeah.
I'm excited I got rid of the bandwidth cap. As I look back on it, the biggest difference is the bandwidth cap, because Comcast gave me the mid split. Once I was up to 250 megabit of upload, at that point, going tripling that or quadrupling it isn't that big of a deal. But going from 40 to 250 sure was the difference.
Yes.
But an interesting thing, actually, adding to a fourth element for 2023. And I don't know, Kim, are you guys doing multi-gig out there yet? 2, 5,
we
and
are.
10?
Yeah, we have. Well, we just have a 1 and a 10. We didn't go with the 2 and 5, but we do have a 10 offering.
I cannot believe, and I would have actually lost this bet about the substantial uptake in our 2.5 gig product since we released it. I'm floored. I thought we would be talking in the 1 to 2s. and we're talking like in the 40s to 50s in just 3 weeks.
Will you look at that, Travis, and tell us whether it's, not today necessarily, but in a future show? I'd love to know what the utilization is. Like, I'm wondering how many people out there are still running a 1 gig WAN and they're just excited about having the 2.5, but they're really not even tapping into it. Like, how many of them ever burst above 1 gig?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of it, and I have, this is not a very scientific study. I think a lot of it is people that have their internet paid for by the companies they work for.
That's exactly it.
They just order whatever's the best thing. They don't, And when they were paying,
there's another group too. The millennials all want the best, the fastest.
Well, we have over like probably 500 customers on 10 gig right now, and residential service. And you're like, what are you using it for? What is the consumer grade device you're using it for? How are you utilizing it? It's fascinating to see that even though we're at 25.3 as our broadband standard, how many people are saying if you have more that they want more. And
if you put in a two, you'd have thousands and thousands on it. So
I'm just confused because I really want to have like 2.5 or 5 gigabit internally for when I'm swapping around a few hundred gigs of files, whether it's video or images, which I do frequently. And I just can't figure out a way to easily get that set up in my house. Like there's just there's no good consumer equipment.
Well, you have to buy a commercial grade
yeah,
server from out of a data center. They're really expensive. Yes. So.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so I use Sonology and they have like, you know, a 10 gig expansion card that I can throw into many of the network attached storage unit devices. But I still have to find, you know, like even because I want like a 20 port switch. I don't want a 5 port switch. You can find like a 2.5 gigabit 5 port. Okay. But it's just,
but you have to have a machine that'll switch that fast. The ports alone don't get you there. Yeah. So, yeah.
So
no, I was impressed, and I think one of the real drivers ultimately is going to be the quality of Wi-Fi devices you get with 2.5 gig WAN ports. So it's still the number one question people don't understand. Why can't I get gigabit from my wireless device? And you explain it, but with that 6 gigahertz spectrum that was approved a few years back, and 2.5 gig port, you can get gigabit speeds on your wireless device. So.
Kim, you were going to.
I was going to say, because I'm going to respond to Mike's comment that was up on the screen about Utopia. Mike, stay tuned. I don't know if we'll have a 2.5 gig, but there is a meeting probably, I think, next week talking about what our 10 gig price is going to lower to. So just absolutely stay tuned. That should be happening at the beginning of the year.
And I assume if you have a 2.5 gig WAN port, plug it into your 10 gig device, it'll be good, huh? Okay.
Now, just to finish the last thought, there are Wi-Fi 7 routers hitting the street, and they're supposedly up to 6 and 10 gigs. So,
and I'm going to CES in a few weeks, so you can, Chris, if you want to do Roger on what he thinks is happening at CES again this year. He got me to go. So I will be on the floor with him, and I will get to give. He can give the geek advice. I will give the practical person of what this means advice.
Awesome. That was fun last year. He did a great job.
Yeah, let's do that again for sure. That's a good idea. Yep.
Well, the only other question I had today, and Ruben just answered it, I was kind of worried it was 24 minutes in and we hadn't seen him. So I was wondering if anyone knew where he was, but he is here. Welcome.
Any other reflections on the year?
Here's one more for Travis. This is the year that Tarana radios really hit the street. So I mean, there were test radios out the year before, but we're seeing some really fast wireless speeds. Again, get them out of the city and your problems there. That's a pretty darn impressive product in a rural place.
I think their new radio that does the 365, the 5 and the 6 gigahertz could be something. Especially out in rural areas. It's a spectrum conversation, right? So if you've got a 320 megahertz channel, you can get quite a bit of bits through it. So I think there is the right application. But as my friend runs a WISP out here in Minnesota, if you don't have fiber fed to those towers, it's irrelevant anyways. It's going to become a backhaul conversation again. It's kind of like these things flip flop all the time. So if you've got fiber to the tower, you can take advantage of it.
Yep.
I have one more thought for the year is I am super happy to see all the creative models that are coming out of cities and communities across the country. And I'm also to see the diversity that this industry is bringing in right now, from the females to to minorities to the youth. It's really an exciting time in the broadband industry, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's been a major shift over the last few years. And I would say also I made a crack about one of the things that BEAD has accomplished is there's hundreds of new government jobs to develop these plans and develop the programs to distribute the money and then to do all the other work around that. But a lot of those folks that are coming in are people who are coming in from other backgrounds, right? They worked in healthcare, they worked in education, they worked in other things. They're coming in without that AT&T mindset, and that's huge. They're not going to just think that the world is has to be run by the big cable and telephone companies.
Hey, I'm taking that personally. Since 40 years ago, I worked for AT&T.
Yeah.
40 years. 40 years ago.
How many iterations of AT&T ago was that?
About 11, I think.
Yeah.
I do have one
Doug,
last. I have one.
Doug, I was
last
three.
one.
I was three when you were working at AT&T. I'm a little frightened now.
Well, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the power of this particular show, because it was just announced that the central bank is going to maintain rates where they're at, and they're going to reduce them by 3/4 of a point next year. So
this was all because of your comment, Trevor.
Yeah, I didn't realize the power. So I would tell the central bank that there's going to be 6,000 homes that are happy they did that, because that's less money going to them and more money going into construction. So
well, I'm going to go lock down that certificate of deposit before the show ends.
Yes,
so
exactly. Yeah.
Carry it from here.
Get your 12 months locked in.
Yes. Last interesting thing, Chris, the FCC just fined 2 ISPs $22 million for dropping 7,600 BEAD commitments. That's almost 3,000
RDOF,
bucks.
right?
RDOF. That's almost $3,000 each a penalty. Now, part of that's getting their money back for the first 2 payments, but they've been wimpy on a lot of things, but they're obviously very serious about they don't want you to drop your RDOF commitment. That's a lot of penalty. So,
and they affirmed that LTD is kaput. They are not giving money to LTD,
Yes.
and same thing with Starlink, which those are the right decisions. And I think a year ago we were predicting, or maybe it was a little bit more, but I was definitely wrong in predicting that the FCC would just do nothing and let them hang in limbo, which I think is unfair. But the FCC stood up, made its decision, stood by it, and I salute them for that.
Well, and it turns out that they were right. I mean, Starlink averages nationwide 58 megabit down. They don't fit the broadband definition that they want them to have. So, which is
Kim?
what, 25.
I was just going to comment on Ruben's comment in the chat that the FCC did do something to celebrate, guys. Where's the balloons?
Yes.
Regarding Starlink,
I just figured that they had a payroll coming up and they needed $22 million.
I was going to say what they did is find somebody. That's nothing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Actually, they had some huge fines this year. They had a $70 million fine.
Can we find them for the maps?
We should. Well, I think that's worth about what, $90 million?
I'm just curious, as my fellow taxpayers on here, are we able to find them for that job? I mean, I don't know how that works. So
if you say it, a few minutes later it becomes true.
Well, I'll keep watching the news here, because we did take care of the interest rate thing. So
right, so do that next. But remember, they find some of those, crappy telemarketers $70 million a year for bothering people with emails.
Yeah.
So
right,
yeah.
And so I was at an event with Drew Clark, his digital infrastructure events. So we were there last week, and the guy who runs Rick, who runs the Maryland broadband office, said, I don't know if I misunderstood what he was saying, but I believe he said that nowhere in Maryland can you currently get Starlink service. Everywhere is on a wait list.
That could be true. It'd be a little surprising on the far southeastern shore and way up in the mountains, but it's possible. So,
yeah. And then the other thing that I wanted to share regarding that has leapt out of my head.
Let me finish the last one. Now, remember, Starlink put up over 2,500 satellites this year. That's helping to solve that problem. So that's a lot of satellites. Yeah.
And as a Starlink user, it is impressive.
Yes.
I mean, compared to cell phone internet. I mean, cell phone internet is horrible, but Starlink's pretty good.
So this is something that I wouldn't share if I actually thought I was going to do it, but I think it would be fun for someone to go through the digital discrimination order and then specify all the ways in which the federal government has engaged in massive digital discrimination in terms of where it puts money. $100 billion toward rural broadband service, very little to solve the urban challenges. There's a lot of discrimination happening there.
Well, I think that's a pretty good research project for ILSR. Sounds like a paper to me. And a grant. Who's going to go get a grant for it? Chris?
Yeah, okay.
A government grant.
That's how it works. I'll just go do it. All right. ACP. This is a quick one because we don't want to dwell. Is there hope for the ACP? 6 months ago, we were saying there are a few pieces of must-pass legislation that will be signed by the end of the year, or the government will shut down and bad things will happen. That was under Speaker McCarthy. Speaker McCarthy left. And if you watched political analysts who advise Wall Street, I'm not talking about the people who always get it wrong on CNN, but get invited back because they have white teeth and big smiles. The people that actually have to get this stuff right for a living, those people were like, yeah, we don't know if Congress is actually going to do anything ever again at this point. And the whole
my favorite. How do you get on CNN? Big smile and white teeth. That's
yeah, it really helps. Huge. You don't have to know what you're saying, but you have to be very confident when you say it. That's a key. You have to be able to say nothing in 30 seconds very confidently with a big smile.
He said that very confidently. Did you see that?
I'm trying out. My teeth aren't white enough, but there's soon going to be AI that'll just fix them up on the fly. Anyway, ACP was hoped to be attached to some of this must-pass legislation. And you know what? There's no must-pass legislation anymore.
It doesn't seem like it. Yeah.
I think at this point, the people who are handicapping this stuff are expecting that Congress will not be putting more money into the ACP. So in April, it will run out of money unless the White House finds some money in the couch cushions and moves it over to help give it a little bit of extra space. But I think is going to be ugly. We'll talk about more in our predictions show when Roger and Kim are in CES. But I just got to say that it's been a year of demoralization of the ACP watching that program hung out to dry.
But can we comment on Ruben's comment before you go into ACP? Yeah, sure. Just comment on this. It is the best comment I've seen all day.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anybody use Radio Shack.
Radio Shack, yeah.
I think it's just the Shack now, but I appreciate the legacy. Doug, what were you going to say?
Well, my expectations have sunk and sunk and sunk. I just cannot see this Congress getting their act together. It's unfortunate. And what will happen, I think it'll eventually get refunded, but they let it completely collapse and everybody get thrown off. They got to start all over to get people on it again. It's going to be a disaster if that happens.
Yeah, I was just talking to a municipal ISP this morning who they were unwrapping their big campaign to get people signed up for it. And I don't want to tell them not to do it, but at the same time, it's like, don't do it.
What about all these people who are hired as digital navigators and their whole job is only to sign people up for the ACP? Right.
Yeah. No, okay, we're not gonna harp on it. Any last comments on that? Like,
my comment is it's gonna run out. It's gonna cause a huge controversy, and then it's gonna get refunded.
But there will be a gap. There will be
a gap. I believe.
I'm not sure it'll be refunded. Absolutely. We can do this out on our predictions, but my prediction right now is that there's going to be USF reform at some point. But that ACP, aside for the White House trying to scramble, I don't think Congress is going to put more money into ACP.
Well, even if it comes back, it'll be half of what it is. They're going to cut the requirement down and give it to less people, is my prediction.
Yeah. So super disappointing. Now, one of the things that Doug wrote about recently is fiber-only networks. And Doug, why don't you tell us what this is and what's important here?
Almost everywhere you go, the government owns fiber networks. They're for connecting schools, for connecting the buildings in a city, for traffic lights. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons they own these fiber networks. Vast majority of them don't have any commercial people on the network. And most of them have a whole lot of empty fiber. So they'll build a 96 fiber, use 12 of them, and the other 80 are just sitting there, right? And they do this for years. And this is the same time when all these cities are saying, we'd like someone to bring a solution to these cities, or we'd like to get broadband out to the rural areas. I was working with the county who complained about that. And then I found that they had this giant countywide network And they didn't even bring that up as part of the conversation. It's like, you already go to those parts of the county. They're like, we do? Like, yes, you do. The fact is, there's just a huge amount of an untapped asset. Now, a lot of it's not useful because it's not going where someone wants to go. But if it was all made available, people would lease it. They could give it away,
Well,
and
even
so
the cities would
yeah,
use it more. Even the
right,
cities would use it more. The cities
right,
don't even know that the asset is like the
right.
electrical department might be using it, but
Oh
somebody
no,
else on the other side
the
might not
traffic
even know it
department,
exists.
the traffic lights might be hooked up with a
Absolutely.
network that no one else in the city is using. That's exactly what
Absolutely.
you're seeing. It's crazy. And so we're just sitting on this giant untapped asset. Some of it was not allowed to be used because of the way it got funded, which means the Comcast and AT&T guys got into the writing of the contract of the funding. It's literally their prohibition against it. Most of it, it's not under those kind of restrictions. It's just sitting empty. And it's just a waste of a natural government resource. There's no
Right.
sense.
And then you also have the potential of using a program like E-Rate to build a new network that would get around town and work with a company. I mean, this is something that I would have loved to see Travis do in St. Paul, where he would work with the city to, to build out to all the schools, also build out to the city's anchor institutions, and then have a network throughout the city that he mostly didn't have to pay for, and then be able to expand to the home from there.
Right.
But local governments just aren't doing that. And when you try to talk to them about it, their eyes glaze over.
Right.
Well, one did. We did that in one community here where we used the city fiber to hook up all the low-income MDUs in the area. And then from there, we hooked up a bunch more MDUs. We used the revenue that came out of there. And now next year, we'll have the entire city covered in fiber. And the only reason...
But they did it because they let you start on the city.
Yeah, it was... I couldn't even believe it. Normally everything is complicated when you deal with the government. With this particular town, it was easier than ordering a circuit from a new cell phone circuit to get.
But was it a smaller town? Was it a smaller town?
And the CIO of the town was probably one of the best I've ever met.
It's known as being one of the better run, cities or suburbs.
Yeah.
And the converse of that is the one of the suburbs of Virginia, where they were basically like, here's a 50-page document that's filled with legalese. You got to sign here, and then you can pick it up in the middle of the street, wherever you happen to be, and you have to figure out how to get into it yourself, and that's not going to work so well.
Yeah, this was a one-page, like 20-year IRU point to point. I mean, it was awesome, and it took less than a week to get the order approved. That's the way it should be.
Well, what I'm going to say is that there's a negative side to this, and I agree with Doug wholeheartedly that there's a lot of asset of government-owned fiber in the ground that people could be utilized differently. But what I did see during COVID and ACP was a lot of the cities took it in their own hands to run their own network in their cities and run an own ring so they could at least reduce their telecom costs by owning that network a lot more than they ever have in going to the commercial sector.
I'm 100% in favor of that. And that's how most of these networks got started. They didn't want to pay Comcast, so they built their own. But then it's like, but then you didn't share the excess.
Yeah. But I think that's where they don't even know where to go because they don't even know what they don't know is the problem. They're like, I have this asset, but most of them are not technologists and they don't know. And I had this conversation the other day with somebody who's like, well, if we make this contract, I said, that's great if you make the contract. But in a few years, when there's new staff in this place and there's new city officials, nobody's going to remember what this contract really said. And nobody's probably going to go and look at it. So you have to make sure you have a legacy and a communication style that goes through the whole entity through the years as well.
Yep.
This leads right into the next discussion, which is whether states are lowering the cost of construction. This was something that in the beginning of BEAD was a recognition that a lot of this money would be used to replace poles and do a lot of other work that isn't immediately related to actually connecting people. And we talked about whether or not states would be taking action. I think at that time, maybe earlier this year, Doug noted that there was not a single bill in any legislature of the state in which the state was seriously looking at how to lower the cost of building out. I think some states like Florida, I think, looked at charter legislation, and Charter Spectrum was able to push through legislation to shift costs. But that was really just to benefit charter, not to benefit anyone else. And so states have not taken seriously their roles in trying to reduce this, with the exception of like New York removed an unnecessary fee, right? I mean, we talked about that when it happened. But for the most part, states have not done the sorts of things you're talking about, Doug, in terms of even assessing their assets and figuring out what they could share and that sort of a thing.
Well, what prompted me to write this was I saw an article that someone wrote just a few weeks ago that said, there's still plenty of time for states to act if they want to get all these things in place for BEAD. It's like, no, this is now finally too late.
Well, no, they could do it next year. I mean,
Well, they could, but to do anything meaningful, it has to be out. It has to get through the bureaucracy first. I mean, even if they started tomorrow, it's pretty hard to change these kind of things overnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of things we're talking about, to be clear here, permitting, rights of way acquisition, again, using these existing assets. The FCC suggested that they go fix their pole attachment processes. I mean, all the things that everyone says, this is the problem. States and BEAD, unfortunately, suggested states do that instead of mandating that states did that. So a few states at least talked about it. I don't see that anyone made any significant changes. That's a real shame, because that's how you get more fiber, making it easier. How much could the city make your life easier, Travis?
Well, yeah, it's really it's more probably the county's not bad. After 14 years of doing it, we've kind of, the thing is, once you know all the people, it's a little bit easier. But if you're trying to go into a brand new area and you're an unknown entity, good luck.
That's what I was thinking about, Travis, was like whether there, whether if there's ideas for you, like if you were to start expanding out into a lower density area, what problems would you anticipate having?
Well, lower density areas are actually fairly easy because the permitting, there's only usually like one person that handles it. The metro areas are the more complex. And of course, if you get into any federal government thing, like any of their land, that's incredibly complicated. But
any of our land.
Well, yeah, our land, yeah. But I don't know how complicated it is. It's just, it takes time. So like there's an area here that we want to cross. We put the permit in 3 years ago. We're hoping to get it next year.
Okay, so I'm the devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
I was going to be the devil's advocate, because there's a lot of these companies who are not like Travis, who are not like Utopia, who don't want to do the right thing, and they don't have all the great causes to get these permits. So cities have to be cautious of when they issue permits in some of these regards, because there's not everybody who is well intended when they're going out to get them. So the city has to protect their own interest as well.
Yeah, when they're stringing their fiber up, you don't want them disturbing your Coke bottle.
Well,
right,
Kim, and I don't know if you see this. You know what I've kind of come to conclude? The permitting is not the problem. What they're most worried about, and maybe this is where Kim was going, they're worried about the restoration.
Well, it is that. But that's what I'm saying. To get the permitting to go to the restoration. So they're almost going past the permitting, not just giving it to them, because they're worried about what the outcome will be and how they're going to have to deal with the residents and the crappy construction methodologies.
I would tell anyone that's getting into building a network, spend the vast majority of your time on restoration and make sure you do it well. Because the last thing that the city wants to hear from is, 500 taxpayers that you messed up their petunias. If you hear from none, they're real happy to give you permits because they bill you for them. I mean, you pay for them; they're expensive. So the city's motivated to give you permits. What they don't want to deal with is restoration problems.
Well, somebody asked me this. A big telco, I had a conversation with a guy from Big Telco last week, and he said to me, they're struggling on building in some areas. And I said, yeah, the permitting process can get a little complicated. And he was like, well, so if you're not a jerk to the permitting people, you probably have better luck. And I was like, yes, you will. It's a relationship, and you do not need to treat them like their employee. You need to treat them like they're another human sitting in front of you, and that you both need something from each other.
And I would imagine big companies are not very good at doing what you just said.
Yeah, and he was a little frustrated because he knew his company was not being the relationship builders, and he was like, and that's probably where some of our real big struggles are coming from.
And part of that problem is they also don't keep the same person in the same job very long.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should get a person who's good at permitting and let them stay there for 20 years, right? So
Well, not just that, but to go even one further, then they have unrealistic expectations about that person. So that person is trying to figure out how to build, and what it comes down to, I think, is then you're behind schedule, and you start getting angry and frustrated if everything doesn't go your way. So, and that's where I feel like this is what the private equity folks, to get back to what Kim said earlier, I think that's when they thought that they could scale these things so much, they just didn't appreciate that, kind of like you cannot scale an ant up to be the size of Godzilla. Like the math doesn't work. You can't scale a fiber operation in 1 year to be 10x. It just doesn't work.
Well, we still saw some announcements this year of companies who don't have one ISP customer who said, I now have a deal with the city to build 500,000 people. And I just sit there going, yeah, good luck with that. And they don't even have the staff yet. So like now they run out to hire the staff, and somehow that's going to become a coherent team who doesn't make every beginner mistake that we all have made in our life. Because there's a whole lot of bad ways to build fiber, but you learn not to do those anymore. And a brand new company is going to make every rookie mistake in the book. So,
and Juan's right here. Sprinklers. You know how many dog fences, those electric fences we fix every year?
Oh yeah.
Because nobody marks them. So when you come through. But I will disagree with Juan.
That's not true. That's not true. The dogs mark them every day.
I would disagree with Juan because I've had probably at least 50 people yell at me about their petunias.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but they are equally angry about their sprinkler. They're equally angry about their dog fence, and sometimes people are just equally angry about anything. And
I think that's important, Travis, and I think you guys do this, but taking video before you do construction to make sure your restoration is as good as possible, because there's so many people who destroyed their driveway 10 years ago that they will call and blame you for destroying their driveway, and you have to have proof. It's a balancing act, but I would agree with you. I've heard more about grandma planted those flowers 15 years ago then you destroyed them than sprinklers. Usually people are a little more reasonable about sprinkler repairs than they are about very emotional.
They do not understand that those were not on their property. They were in public right away.
Oh, that's a whole
absolutely
conversation. Yeah.
Yes.
So my father just had solar put in, PV on the roof of his garage, and when they were running the electric cable to the house, they went through the Comcast coax cable from the pole, and Comcast came out a day later. I think my dad had to originally Comcast was like, we'll be in a week, and my dad was like, nope, and called enough times that whatever, they got him someone out there the next day, and the electric company, the installers had said they would pay for Comcast costs. Comcast said, nope, it's on the house. We don't charge for the restoration. And so you have to wonder, how often does that happen where you have both sides willing to pay?
It wasn't worth the paperwork because they would have to put in a legal formal complaint, which took more money than just doing it. So yeah, that's paperwork.
Well, yeah, and to put that in perspective, most sprinkler fixes and most dog fence fixes are 10 to 15 minutes.
Right.
And literally $3 worth of parts. So they're not hard to fix.
So you just if you hit it, your crew knows it. Do they just get it hunker down and fix it right there and then, or what?
Well, see, normally you don't know. You only know when the sprinkler system comes on. So
or when the dog runs away.
If the call comes in by noon, we'll have it fixed by 5. No cost at all.
No, I think that's the key, right? You don't know. We call it here, and I don't know what you call it, Travis, but we call it sprinkler season. I know in some of our communities when secondary water turns on, you find out every place you hit and everybody calls in. But those restoration issues get more customers every day of the week if you show up the same day than any amount of marketing that is on the street. People just want to be seen.
And they want it resolved. I mean, amen, Kim. Those are the things that resonate through social media.
Absolutely.
I called. They were fixed by the end of the day. Can't believe it. You want to drive that, but some of these things you just don't know. Now, water mains and gas mains.
But if you can get these folks to watch this show, we could get a.
Digital Emmy. We're going for the digital Emmy.
We're going for the digital Emmy.
I think the way that you get there is to talk a lot about it.
I think so too. You got to start the hype.
Yes. So we are expecting at any moment, I think Gigi Sohn will come through, and we'll be talking about dark money. But in the meantime, I'm curious if anyone has any other questions, or I can go back through my older list to see what we haven't covered in the past.
I just think it's an exciting time, Chris. I think it's an exciting time, and we can complain every day of the week about what's not going right, but there's a lot going right. I talk to friends across many industries right now, and everybody's frustrated and angry because where the markets are or where the markets aren't. And we're luckily in an industry that is just in its pinnacle of the gold rush. And I think it's just it's like, I'm very excited to be here. I mean, I'm wearing sequins for this lovely occasion. It's
that's right.
nice.
Let me throw this out there then, because it's related to this, and it's not a prediction that would be good for the next show, but it's been a year of AI now, right? And it's still just the beginning. And I've said quietly for several years that I think, if you look back in 50 years at the first, 50, 60 years of internet access, I think society changes more than it did under electricity, and electricity changed everything. And I think AI coupled with the internet, if we can get through it without some horrible biological agent that wipes a lot of people out because someone has access to technology that without the responsibility, if we can get through that, I think it's really going to be amazing what we see in the next 10, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? By then, there's going to be people on our show that are going to say, I was only 3 years old when Kim first started talking about that.
You're welcome, Doug. You're welcome.
You're fine.
You guys enjoy, because I hope to be staring at palm trees and not worrying about AI or computers or anything. So that in 20 years, yeah.
I hope to still be on this show.
I think people are going to be disappointed in the lag to Mars when they're trying to keep up with this Emmy award-winning show from their new colony. But I mean, just to give you an idea, so did you all see the science story about the AI that developed a low-cost method of creating oxygen from materials on Mars? They said it would take a human 2,000 years to run through the experiments to figure it out.
I have a life, Chris, so I have not caught up with that show yet. But when I don't, I will make sure to put that on my list of.
Our Google feeds are very different.
And at the other end of the spectrum, Chris, I don't have a life, and I didn't see it either. So.
But I mean, to give you an idea, I just feel like there's been this expectation that, for instance, we can't remove carbon from the atmosphere without it being very energy intensive. And I wonder how long until there's a creative, weird series of processes that can resolve that. It doesn't change a lot of the things that we need to fix, but there's.
You don't have carbon eliminators in your yard?
I do not.
I have them growing right out here. They're called trees.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the time scale is off for our need, unfortunately.
Okay. I was just wondering if you
that, I mean, looking at how does anyone think that there's a chance that we have significant progress on Alzheimer's next year? With the scientific research starting to take on more AI type things, that more or less solves our healthcare issues. If we can get a handle on dementia and diabetes, our healthcare expenditures over the next 30 years flatten out hugely. Doug, you're still muted. Let's just all wait in silence while Doug fixes it. It's not a hardware mute. I think the software's muted you.
Software's muted.
It was the software. Yes.
This is why we're going to be an Emmy nominated show, guys. This is it.
Oh no, that was the humor break. So yes. There has been amazing breakthroughs in Alzheimer's the last 2 years. I think they are going to start solving this stuff. So, my reading list is closer to Chris's. This stuff fascinates me. So.
And Doug, your mic switched to a less good one that picks up more resonance from the room.
Well,
we are winning.
All I'm going to say, and I try to explain this to Chris when we eat chicken wings, is I dig in the dirt for a living. So, when you get into all these complex topics, that's for smart guys like the three of you. So
Well, see, this is my prediction. We need to make a prediction before our prediction show, Travis, that we need to start a blog that is not smart to combat, Doug's really like interesting blog.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, anyone who's smart who's listening to the show is like, which one is the smart one?
Not me.
So regarding the bet, I did get fiber. I believe it was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And if we play by Price is Right rules, I might have won, but I think Doug effectively won. My hope was the end of the summer. I think Doug was like 2024. So it's closer to 2024.
Well, I'm glad you got it.
Yeah, no. And I mean, I'm still have this issue of just, I need a faster internal network to take advantage of all the stuff. So let's start talking about the dark money campaign, and then Gigi can join us when she can, although she'll add more than I think we can. But there is a big campaign to try to delegitimize municipal broadband. And I find it kind of fascinating because municipal broadband is not getting any real benefit from BEAD. Like, we're not seeing any cities being like, oh, we're going to start a new municipal broadband service because we're going to get money from BEAD or anything else. And so I don't think we really know what's motivating it.
Yeah, I don't think any of us know what's motivating it, Chris. I mean, we are seeing a huge push here in Utah. There is rumor on the street that is a $1 million media buy against UTOPIA Fiber. And it's interesting because you wonder what they're trying to really accomplish with going after muni broadband. Do they think that we're going after the BEAD money? What are they afraid of? Because, $1 million gets you a lot of media. So what is their motives? And I am a person, I will say it up front. Let's have a conversation, but at least tell us who you are first.
Yeah, I mean, so before you go, Doug, I do want to put that in context. So in 2009, Longmont was what we now think of as the earlier wave of municipal fiber, although at the time it felt like the more recent wave. They faced a campaign of $250,000 in a city of 80,000 people. They lost the people that were against municipal fiber. I should say Comcast won, which was the major instigator there through the Cable Association of Colorado, whatever its name is. 2 years later, when people learned more about what that election was about, they were horrified. And Comcast put in almost $500,000, breaking the record. Again, it's via the Cable Association of Colorado, I should say, but we assume that Comcast was behind it. And they lost the election 60-40 roughly, when not a single person on the ballot endorsed Comcast's position. They were still able to get 40% of the vote by spending $500,000. A few years later, Fort Collins goes, and between CenturyLink and Comcast, again, working through intermediaries, I believe the campaign expenditure report suggested $900,000 worth of expenditure at that point to try to convince people to vote no. They also lost that campaign and I think the local group led by Colin and Glenn, two local boys, they put together a campaign for like $15,000 or $25,000, and they were able to win that referendum, with the support of other folks around. So $1 million is more than we have seen anywhere else, and those were over very specific fights in which we did an analysis, and at that point I will say in defense of Comcast is that, like, for them, losing just a little bit of market share is millions of dollars of lost revenue per year, and in terms of lost competitors, and then having to reduce your prices to compete. And so if anything, it would be smart for these companies to put more money into it. And unfortunately, we might be seeing that right here. Now, Doug, I see that Gigi has just arrived. So we're going to throw her on, ready or not. Welcome, Gigi. We just kicked the topic off.
Hi, of course, I lost the link. What else is new? I'm juggling 15 things at once. But
well, you found it, and we welcome you.
Kim didn't tell you that this is the dress up Christmas show.
Yeah, this is
sequence.
I'm a Jew. Leave me alone.
It is Hanukkah, so
Happy
I think we're not allowed to make
everybody.
fun of her.
You too. Well, this is not really Christmas. This is Grateful Dead skeletons, so we're good.
So Gigi, we had just kicked it off and Kim had explained that we don't know where the money's coming from or even what the overall purpose is, but someone sure is spending a lot of money to tarnish municipal broadband. So you want to start off by just reminding us who you are and why we think you're an interesting person to talk about this?
Well, my name is Gigi Sohn. I've been doing communications policy for a long time. As a consumer advocate, and was in the FCC for a while. I'd hoped to go back to the FCC as a commissioner, but that didn't happen. So I'm back in the field as an advocate for a number of things, but in this particular context, as the executive director of the American Association for Public Broadband, which advocates for more community-owned broadband. We seek to promote the model, and we want to see a lot more communities choose to own their own assets, their own infrastructure. We want to defend the model, which is under enormous attack. I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that I'm running this trade association. Maybe so.
It's you.
And also to make sure we get fair access to all the billions of dollars that are floating out there. Originally, I think the Biden administration wanted to give community broadband a leg up, but the cable industry made sure that didn't happen. But we at least want fair access to that funding, whether it be BEAD funding or Digital Equity Act funding or ACP funding. So that's what we're about. And we've had a lot of attacks throughout my tenure as the executive director and a lot lately. And many of them seem to involve Kim's company. And I just don't understand why.
I have no idea. Gigi. Maybe it's attack against both of us. I don't know.
Maybe it's because you're successful and you're scaring the living daylights out of them.
I think it's just always like to say at Utopia is that we wouldn't be in existence if the incumbent or whoever's providing service was actually delivering what the consumer needs. And I think all we care about is just giving communities the choice of whatever they want to do, whether it's going with a big incumbent or going with municipal. We just want to make sure that communities have the choice to make the decisions for their future.
Yeah, and I don't know if I just want to also invite Rye on. Rye, if you want to pop on your video and join us for a second and talk a little bit about the year in stats, you'd be welcome to. But if you don't want to, also I can try and mangle it a little bit. But we did see more municipal broadband popping up this year than I expected. And Rye was just doing some of the research to run down those numbers. If you want to cover them real quick.
Sure. Way to put me on the spot, Chris. So
I recall it was double. So you said there was between 20 and 24 new municipal networks, many of them offering a retail model. The thing that I loved is that actually ignores the fact that there are probably more than 100 towns in Vermont that are part of these public utility districts that are moving forward. Sorry, communications union districts. Yeah, you just wrote a big report about it. People will see it at some point here.
At some point, in a month or so, maybe a little bit longer. Yeah, a bunch of new community-owned infrastructure over the last year. Not only new munis doing it for the first time, but the expansion of some of the ones that have been around a long time, including Utopia. Plus, I think we had 6 new open access networks launch just in 2023. And so on the podcast, which will come out next Tuesday, I just mentioned that 2023 looks like one of, if not the best year for community-owned broadband infrastructure as we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, so Gigi's getting her job done.
Do you think that is because of the final result of ARPA coming to? I mean, where did all this get going? Right.
I think we saw a ton of ARPA projects get off the ground and energize communities in ways that we hadn't seen in the past. I think we also saw, obviously the pandemic jump-started a bunch of communities, and I think with IIJ and BEAD coming down the pipeline, maybe some communities that were on the fence decided, it's going to happen elsewhere, and we don't want to be stuck with the reverse donut hole problem. So let's get our butts moving.
I mean, my sense is I think people are just sick of the lousy service and the slow speeds they're getting from some of the incumbents. I think the Bountiful City example is a perfect example, right? Where, the city council decided 5-0, and this was a bottoms up movement from the city. They went to the incumbents. They said to the incumbents, give us more, give us better, give us affordable. And they're like, nah, not interested. So I think people are, it has been a few years since anybody has argued that broadband isn't an essential service. But even as the pandemic has allegedly faded, it's still critically important for folks. So I think people are just saying we need an alternative. We're just not satisfied with what's going on, and we want to decide for ourselves. So I'm really excited, and I think it's because there's that movement that you're starting to see the incumbents push back again. Once again, I don't know if you discussed this already before I got on, hiding behind dark money groups. Nobody knows more about the attacks by dark money groups than I do. Because
Gigi, we still want the picture of the billboard in Vegas that they put up.
I know I should frame it and put it on my wall. Look, if Comcast came out in its own name and said we don't want competition, we don't want communities building their own, they would never win a battle. They're still not winning a battle, but they're certainly costing communities money. They're costing companies like UTOPIA money. They're just trying to delay the inevitable. But it keeps me busy, so I guess it's good in that regard.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Gigi, what you're hearing, because I think you've just been doing a whirlwind tour in recent months, hearing from different folks locally. One of the things that we've been hearing distressingly for a while was communities saying, well, we're thinking about it, but we're waiting to see how much BEAD money we're going to get, to which our answer has always been zero. You're getting zero. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't hear that much, other than the CUDs, right? I love those guys. I mean, I work very closely with them. They're going to get BEAD money. They're lucky they have a state government that, wants to make sure that they get access to those funds. But I'm not hearing that a lot from other community broadband providers. In fact, I think a lot of them have kind of thrown their hands up and said it's going to be, particularly with the debt, the timelines that the states have to put together. They've got to put together all of their subgrantees in a year, which of course favors the incumbents. The way the scoring systems have gone, a lot of states favor the incumbents. I think the community broadband systems realize that they'll still need to be there because very few people think that $42.5 billion is gonna close all the gaps. So trust me, there's still going to be a role for community broadband, whether or not they get BEAD funding. But let me mention another model that's been really interesting. I don't know if people are familiar, and Chris, if you haven't had them on your show, the folks from Connect Humanity, Yochai Ben-Avi, Brian Vo. So they basically have, an investor, big institutional investor who wants to invest in community broadband, and they're building in East Carroll Parish, Louisiana. They're building in Memphis. I mean, they've got all these projects going on around the country. So you don't just need government money. There are other sources of money. There's a foundation called the Post Road Foundation that's also funding community broadband projects. So there is private money out there and philanthropic money out there. And getting the BEAD money is a colossal pain in the neck. It's not an easy process. So community broadband advocates and those looking to build but needing help should not necessarily fret if they don't get BEAD money, because there are other sources of money out there.
Travis or Doug, any thoughts you wanted to jump in with?
Well, two things. One is this idea of the people hiding behind these imaginary corporations. This has been around since 2000, and about every 2 to 3 years they've resurfaced. But they used to be very focused on one community. Don't let this community go, but all of a sudden, this is very unprecedented. I mean, it used to be they used to only publish these papers to influence either state legislatures or a handful of Congress people. That was the whole reason. They didn't really care if they were truthful. They didn't care anything about the reports. They were actually hilarious to read. But this is a very different thing we're seeing now.
But it's very interesting, Doug, because like at the end of the commercials we're seeing in Utah, it's telling consumers to contact their legislators. And we're not in a big contentious battle with a new city. We're not we're just building the existing cities. So you're like, what are you contacting your legislators for?
And what are you going to tell them? Like, I saw the commercial.
We have almost 2,700 reviews at a 4.6 rating from our residents. So it's like, what are you doing? What is your motives? I think that's why it's like the dark money pisses me off, because let's just if it's a fight, let's have a fight.
Yeah,
But
you
let's
might
not hide
consider,
behind
Kim,
something.
you might consider reaching out to your customers. I do remember in 2008, Comcast, through, again, probably the state association in Tennessee, they sued Chattanooga, twice in 2 different courts, lost, appealed both, lost. And then they did a radio campaign and a media campaign in which they encouraged people to call City Hall. And City Hall recorded more calls in favor of municipal broadband than they had opposing it. And so it was kind of a backfire, and I don't think they've yet figured that out. So, but Gigi, I'm just sort of curious, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, obviously you were the victim of a nationwide campaign. Maybe they're just using a new muscle that you helped them build.
Yeah, it's all my fault. Yeah, I mean, look, again, I don't think the cable companies can't come out in their own name, because if they were the ones that put their face out there as disliked as they are, they'd make no progress. So instead they hide behind these, good government groups with anodyne names to try to convince people that this is a bad thing, that, oh, well, we should be building bridges and roads, which, by the way, they also oppose, right? Instead of building municipal broadband. So one of the other places that they've attacked is Falmouth.net. So this is a town in Cape Cod that is building a municipal system. And it's the same group, the Domestic Policy Caucus. Again, can you get any more anodyne than that name? But they have a separate project, right? They've got the project that's attacking Utopia, but they also have a project, and that's what called nogov.net, like how imaginative. They've got one called Mass Priorities. So it's supposedly just Massachusetts, although it's the same people. This guy Thrasher, who I think David Eisenberg, who many of you may know, this guy used to work way back in the day for AT&T, great public interest advocate. He wants this guy Thrasher to debate me in Cape Cod, and I'm like, bring it on, baby. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
you want to debate me? Go for it.
I've extended.
I wouldn't choose that. I wouldn't choose that, Gigi. I don't want to debate you.
I've offered to debate, and it's weird how often these people are out of town and unable to make the dates that would work, Gigi. So I don't think they're going to take you up on it. Travis, did you have any questions or comments?
I was just curious, because I'm not really that well versed in this topic. Is this predominantly mid-tier markets and smaller communities doing this, or are we seeing some initiatives in the major metropolitan areas?
It tends to be smaller. Okay. And I've said, and I don't, Gigi or Kim, both of you could correct me because you both have a lot of context out there. But if you take the largest 100 metros in the United States, I think there's like 12 or fewer that have an actual plan to do something that's innovative moving forward. And there's 88 who are just hoping that someone else fixes it for them. So that's how it breaks down in my mind.
Yeah, and what really drives me bats about, and has for years, particularly when I was at the FCC and we tried to preempt the laws of Tennessee and North Carolina that prohibited the municipal broadband networks there from expanding their footprints, is that, it's not like the companies want to serve the areas that the community broadband networks want to serve. They not only want to stop competition, they want to stop people from providing service where they're not even interested in providing service. And I can't even think of anything worse than that from a sort of anti-consumer, anti-competitive context.
Part of that is they are now shrill. They are getting scared. Their boardrooms are scared. They're all losing customers. They were doing these fights when they were gaining 1 million customers a quarter, and now they're losing customers. They are really starting to panic. It's kind of fun to watch.
But it's their own fault.
Oh yes,
it's their own fault, because like there's a community that we built in is because the incumbent pulled out of the community. It's not that these communities. I think the misinformation that's out there is that the communities want to build their own networks. No, they don't. They want the private sector to deliver, but when they haven't, they have to take their future into their own hands. And by doing that, they're building their own networks. Communities and city officials do not want more work to do than they have to do on a daily, every day.
I want to add a little bit of context to that. And Gigi had said, when you were at the FCC, you tried to preempt. You did preempt. It just didn't last very long.
Right.
But
The court right.
You successfully preempted, and then the city of Wilson expanded its network to serve a nearby town, Pine Tops, as well as a farm nearby that had no high-quality service. And then when the Sixth Circuit overturned the FCC, while also finding that all of your findings of fact were correct, they just found that the FCC didn't have the authority, but they found that it was reasonable for the FCC to come to that determination, which I thought was nice of the Sixth Circuit to do because they didn't have to do that, but they kind of did. At that point, the state of North Carolina, rather than just grandfathering that in, literally required that the city of Wilson remove its network from Pine Tops. I mean, this is how ridiculous this has gotten. The people of Pine Tops, I forget which hurricane it was, but they were driving to and from Raleigh before and after the hurricane and during massive recovery, during which Wilson had actually set up fiber for the camps where people were staying because their houses had been destroyed. And the people of this town are like driving to Raleigh to lobby on telecom because they were going to get their network shut off. It's ridiculous. You can't make this stuff up.
You can. And North Carolina obviously got a lot of BEAD money because it's so unserved and underserved, and there was an opportunity. Well, that's the power of the incumbents.
I'm in North Carolina. This state's completely owned by charter. I mean, there's no question about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like if you go back and find that Tom Tillis, his chief of staff, I think actually went to work for Time Warner Cable right afterwards, and like the connections there's a lot of weird stuff that happened in Raleigh around that time that centered around what is now Charter Spectrum, and a lot of those people are still there running everything. It's gross. Gigi, we're almost out of time, so let me ask you: is there any last points you'd want to share with us?
Yeah, I do. I think the most important thing is, one of my challenges as being the head of AAPB is getting current network operators to join, right? Because they think, oh, we're good. We've been operating forever. We're fine. The incumbents are not going to go after us. Well, in Frankfort, Kentucky, that network's been around for what, a decade more?
And it started with one business because that business was going to leave town without the municipal fiber network.
Right. Well, there's a state senator now that is pushing legislation to get them to sell the assets to private enterprise. So nobody should be comfortable that because they've been operating and they're well liked. I mean, look at UTOPIA, right? That they're safe. And if there's one thing that I can do well, and AAPB can do well, is fight back and shed light, right? You know what they say about, light being the best disinfectant on what's going on. I'm not going to take credit for what happened at Bountiful City, but I will say that my op-ed made national news. Like I had people calling me from all over the country saying, I saw your piece. It's an outrage. I am getting some fan mail from Cape Cod as well. So, local communities see this and it pisses them off. So I guess my message is, look, AAPB wants to grow. We want to do more of this. We want to grow the field. We want to make sure that, my feeling is to strengthen numbers. The more of these community networks, the more of these municipal networks that there are, the harder it becomes for the incumbents to knock us down. So I'm encouraging everybody who's listening to this, who likes my message, who loves Kim McKinley, to join AAPB. Even as a friend of Public Broadband, because we have a lot of work to do to make sure that this model goes throughout the country.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gigi, for joining us. We look forward to having you on again in the future when we can devote more time to this. But we're thankful for you being able to join us. We hope that everyone has a wonderful holiday. We will plan on being back with the regular crew on probably that first week of January for some predictions if we can muster them. And so, yes, we do still have that new mic coming for Doug, but it's a technical hurdle to get it working. Yeah, Gigi's one worked well. I should have got that one for Doug.
Can I just say I love Doug's? I read everything you write, Doug. I agree probably with 95% of it. But one day you and I should just have a conversation about some of the policy stuff and how things work in Washington. You're, like I said, you're mostly right about it, but every once in a while, I'm like, I wish Doug would call me.
Yeah, Gigi, if you're in Asheville, you should stop by. I almost did, and then I bailed because I realized how far away Asheville was from where I was in North Carolina.
Well, we have land near Boone that we're building a house in, and we love to pop over to Asheville. So next time, I'm going to take you up on that.
Very good. You're welcome anytime. So I just want to say this is our first show. We're building momentum, Gigi. We want to get a digital Emmy. So you're the first step.
Thank you.
Our first celebrity, actually, right? I mean, this is a big deal. So yeah, here, feeling the Emmys right in our grasp.
It's right there.
You know.
So with that, I think we're going to wrap up. I hope everyone has wonderful holidays, gets a chance to disconnect and spend time with family, or if you just love work more than family, do that. Do whatever makes you happy. And we will see you back in January in a new year. Until then, this has been another great year of Connect This.